Chapter 9. A Strange Dismissal. Nancy looked closely at the package without touching it. Although clearly addressed to her, the sender's name did not appear, and it had not been sent by mail or express. How did it come? She asked her aunt. Up the dumbwaiter. 15 minutes after the package was delivered, the mysterious phone warning came. Nancy, we must call the police. Yes. Her niece agreed and reached for the telephone. Within a few minutes, 2 detectives were at the apartment. They examined the package. There might be a bomb in it, one officer announced. But there's no ticking sound, Nancy protested. In spite of the warning, the package may be perfectly harmless. I'd hate to ruin the contents unless it were necessary. I agree, the other detective said. Okay, we'll open it, his companion agreed. But not here. We'll take it back to headquarters for a test. Nancy and her aunt went along. They were fascinated by the detection gadget. Guess the package won't pop, the officer said. If the contents are dangerous, it's for some other reason. The man untied the string and removed the heavy brown wrapping paper. Can't see a thing yet, he muttered. Well, here goes. He raised the cover of the box an inch and peered into the crack. Then, with an exclamation of disgust, he threw off the top. Look what's inside! Nothing but a doll! You've called the police for this? He chided the Drews. With a gesture of contempt, the detective started to pick up the doll. Nancy darted forward and cried, Don't touch that! It's dangerous! Dangerous? What do you mean? The officer asked. It contains a drug. This witch doll was stolen a few days ago in Jefferson. You're sure? I never saw the doll until now, Nancy answered, but I believe it's the one. Perhaps you'd better check with the owner of the Jefferson Galleries to make sure. We'll do that, the detective decided as he replaced the box cover. Any idea who sent you the package and why? His buddy asked. Nancy was evasive. In her own mind, she was satisfied that the doll was the stolen one and had been sent as an offering of ill will by Nataka. Since she had no proof, the girl detective did not want to give the gypsy's name to the police. She wondered who could have telephoned the friendly warning. It was evident that her present address was no secret to at least 2 people who did not wish to make themselves known to her. After leaving police headquarters, Nancy said to her aunt, Nataka probably saw me on the street and followed me to your apartment, she said. But I can't imagine who my unknown friend is. Whoever she is, Miss Drew replied, I'm thankful to her and certainly relieved that no harm came to you. Nancy spent another day in New York and had lunch with Alice Crosby. Then the following morning, despite her aunt's insistence that she stay longer, Nancy felt that she should get back to River Heights and work on the mystery. She caught an afternoon plane and reached home in time for dinner. After telling her father and Hannah Gruen of her adventures, she telephoned George. I'm back from the big city, she said. How's everything? Bess and I have lots to tell you. Suppose we stop by in the morning. I plan to see Mrs. Struthers, Nancy explained. I brought her an interesting old album with the strange source of light message in it. Well, I may have a clue for you, George said. Want to know the location of a gypsy camp with a violinist? Do I? Then Bess and I will pick you up about 10 o'clock and show you where it is. George and Bess arrived at the Drew home exactly at 10. Nancy hopped into the car and the 3 were off on a search. We knew you'd be interested, Bess said as they rode along. Someone was playing a violin when we passed the camp the other day. We didn't see who it was, but the music was beautiful. Nancy asked a dozen eager questions, but the cousins could tell her little about the group. They had noticed it while driving through a distant town 2 days before. "I hope the gypsies are still there," Nancy said. In a short while, the girls reached their destination and climbed out of the car. Several gypsy children were playing close by. They began chattering and some ran off, evidently to tell their parents that visitors had arrived. Nancy walked over to the remaining group. As the children stared at her, she asked if they knew a man named Romano Pepito. Soberly, the children shook their heads. Nancy took a package of gum from her pocket. "This is for the first boy or girl who tells me the name of your violinist," she announced. "Mirko!" several cried in unison. Nancy split the package of gum so that each child received a stick. "Now lead me to Mirko," she requested. "Nobody but gypsies can see him," one little girl said. "It's not allowed." At this point, a pretty woman, with bangles in her ears and bracelets jingling, appeared from a tent and came swiftly to the group. The girls expected to be ordered to leave. Instead, the gypsy smiled and offered to tell their fortunes. "Have you a license to tell fortunes?" Nancy inquired. "Yes, I have," the woman answered. She reached out as if to take the girl's hand. "Shall I read your future?" "No, thank you. I've had my fortune told recently," Nancy replied. Just then, the strains of violin music came from one of the trailers at the far end of the camp. Nancy's expression revealed her interest. "I'd like to meet Mirko," she said. The gypsy woman looked at her intently, shook her head, and whispered, "Gypsy music fills the air. Listen, and you will learn. But never try to pierce their secrets, or misfortune will befall you." She turned and walked swiftly toward the cluster of trailers. "Now, what did she mean by that?" Bess asked nervously. "I think she was telling us to move on and ask no more questions about the violinist," George remarked. "Then let's not make tracks," Bess urged. "Not so fast," Nancy pleaded. "I've not learned half enough." She searched in her pocketbook and pulled out some lifesavers. She held them up for the children to see and asked, "How many of you have dolls?" All the little girls bobbed their heads. "Show them to me, will you please? And then I'll give you some candy," Nancy coaxed. With a shout, the children ran off to the trailers. Soon they returned with their treasured possessions. One quick glance and Nancy knew none of them was the special doll Mrs. Struthers wanted. Most of them were made of rough, unpainted wood. One, with a wax face, had a ludicrous expression. The wax had evidently been cracked in places by cold weather and melted in others by the sun. "You must have lots of fun with these babies of yours," Nancy said kindly. "They're not very pretty," one little girl spoke up. "You ought to see Nataka's dolls. They're beautiful." Nancy was careful to keep her voice steady as she asked, "Where is Nataka?" "Gone," the child said with a shrug. "Nataka always comes and goes," another child contributed as she sucked on a lifesaver Nancy had offered. "She never stays long." "Nataka comes and goes alone?" Nancy probed. "Sometimes perhaps with a man?" "With Anton," the child with the wax doll answered. "And Zoris, does he live here?" "The king of the gypsies?" the little girl said with awe. "He went—" Before she could say any more, a bell tinkled and all the children scampered off. Nancy wondered if they had been called away purposely. "Let's go before someone comes after us," Bess urged nervously. At that moment, the violinist began to play again, this time Gypsy Love Song. The music seemed to come from the farthest tent. "Girls, I must meet that man," Nancy exclaimed. "He may be Romano using another name." "No, don't try it," Bess warned. "There's no telling what might happen to you." "Remember the gypsy woman's warning," George added fearfully. "Please don't." But Nancy was gone. Fearlessly, she hurried toward the musician's trailer. End of chapter 9.